All right, hey everyone, this is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. So as you can see with the natural sunlight and everything flowing in, it is a very bright and early morning here. As you can tell, we have my new special guest this week for the video, which is me in my bathrobe. Because I think those of you, probably most of you will know that last week, Manga Plus Wish, everyone announced that they're now going to be putting out the official chapters for Shonen Jump a couple of hours earlier than they used to. So rather than dropping around, I think like noon, 1 o'clock, which was the previous time, it's dropping around like 8 o'clock. I think it was whatever time they use for their one. So it's about, I think, 8-ish here now in the morning for me. So I got up bright and early this morning, made myself a nice cup of coffee, and decided we'll start my reaction to the weekly Shonen Jump chapters bright and early this morning. So initially, I was not planning on doing this, and I wanted to really stick to my original idea of kind of doing, monthly 4 chapters of One Piece at once idea, thinking it might have been a better way to go, but unfortunately, discourse being what it is, this last week was kind of rife with all sorts of that based on, innocuous comments a certain person made regarding last week's chapter and a few other things. So I figured I might as well, get back to doing the weekly reviews again just to keep current in the conversation and kind of explain my, hot takes that I post on Twitter. So as you've probably already guessed from the title, this is going to be a double chapter, almost reaction review. Like, it's not going to be reaction 967 because I've already read it and kind of done that stuff. But I will go through the chapter again quickly, really focusing on the latter half with Wano stuff, not really on the front half, but I figured I'd just go through the entire chapter in case something else sparks I want to feel like talking about. And then after that, I'll dive into the actual reaction reviews for One Piece chapter 969. But I will touch on all those when we actually get to those moments. So without further ado, let's go through One Piece chapter 968, Oden's Return. And we have Gang Bej's Oh My Family, Volume 17, Save the Boss's Wife, Gotti. And we have translation Stephen Paul, lettering Vanessa Satone. So we picked up where we left off last time, with Oden narrating going, when Roger returned from Laugh Tale, Red Taro came to him and asked him something, only to shed tears afterward. The birth of the King of the Pirates caused a stir around the world, prompting the Navy to leap into drastic action. And you see Raleigh reading off the news going, the man who achieved wealth, fame, and power, the King of the Pirates, Gold Roger. And it's called back to chapter 1, which began much the same way. And you have Roger getting all affronted going, hey, that's Gold D Roger to ya. But I gotta say, King of the Pirates has a nice ring to it. He goes, well, at this point I can understand why the world government want to hide your name. And you see the world at large referred to everything that Roger gained as the One Piece. It's like they have no idea, wah ha ha. But because of that fame, they'll all come after you now, Roger. And so you see various groups of pirates doing just that, going, I'll be the one to take out Roger. And someone going, find Roger now. And you see a group of pirates that look a lot like T-Bone going, steal his treasure. They said Gold Roger's got everything in his hoard. Roger goes, looking back on it now, it's all been miraculous. See how far we came once I already knew I was going to die? I have nothing but gratitude to you all. His crew are doing, the typical gag of, oh, shucks, like, you bastard, don't think the compliments are going to work. Where they're like, whoa, 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 what's with all the gushing feelings out of nowhere, Captain? You can't do that to us. You're making us blush, you rascal. They're like, rascal. And we see, all right, here we goes. We're ready. Lay it on us. Roger goes, I'm hereby disbanding the Roger Pirates. And they're like, ah! And you say, glub, glub. As you see below Fishman Island, the two Sea Kings having the conversation where they go, the birthing is at hand. Our sovereign will soon be born. And another in a distant sea. The whales are delighted in anticipation of the day the two sovereigns shall meet again. We have been waiting for so long. It is almost here, and surely all will go well this time. Just 10 until the birth, another 15 to grow. So just quick comments on this one as I'm going through. So I think people are kind of debating on Twitter with regards to the chapter whether they're talking about Luffy Shirahoshi or Luffy Vivi as being the two sovereigns. And I've seen debate for both sides where people are saying, hey, well, Eam was cutting up Vivi's picture and everything else during that, and based on paneling, it could be Vivi and Shirahoshi. And I've seen other people saying, oh, it's Luffy and Shirahoshi. I land firmly in the camp of it being Luffy and Shirahoshi just because of Otohime's whole prophecies about, there'll be someone that comes one day to teach the Mermaid Princess how to control her powers. And the whole idea of, Oden saying, oh, Joy Boy's going to be coming back. We need to get ready for his arrival. And, someone will carry on his will. And I know people are also confused about the timeline, so I kind of did a quick little mental juggle over it last night. And the flashback took place about 41 years ago. And I think this is about 25 years or so before the current timeline. So based on that, that matches up perfectly with the Seekings are saying, which is about 10 years or so for Shirahoshi to be born. And then, the 15 for her to grow because she's 16 in the current timeline. And then it could go either way for Vivi or Luffy because Vivi's 18 post time skip, Luffy's 19 post time skip, so they're within a year of each other age-wise, so it could be either. But I still land at the camp of Luffy Shirahoshi just because that just makes the most sense to me. We think back to Roger again having asked, going, who the hell's talking out there? And thinking back to, hey, Charlie, when is the Mermaid Princess going to be born? And she goes in 10, doing the all adorable holding up her fingers. And Roger goes, I'm certain that voice was speaking the truth. Someone will be born and eventually surpass us. See, we were just too early. The One Piece, they call it. I wonder who will find it. And Roger's like, that'd be my son, of course. And Raleigh's like, you don't have one. He's like, but I will, just you wait. Yeah, ha ha. All right, time to drink, lads. Head toward the sea where the Navy won't be waiting. I'll be the first one off the ship. And make sure Oden gets home next. Before I forget, I should also point out a couple of people on Twitter are also commenting that Charlie was not able to give an accurate timeline when people are asking her when Luffy will, destroy the island. And she's kind of like, oh, it could happen in 2 years, it could happen in 10 years, it could happen in 200 years. And then, this flashback, she's able to give an exact estimate time for when it's going to happen. So I'm not saying that, Oda hasn't plotted this out yet. He's kind of keeping it under wraps because of that. But that's an absolutely minor nitpick. And you have Oden. So you have the crew, Roger Pirates, partying and cheersing. And Roger tells Oden, I intend to meet with Whitebeard before I die. Should I have him send Izo back to Wano? Oden's like, no. He's become very comfortable on that ship. Tell him you take care of White Kichi for me. Roger's like, hey, will do. Again, absolutely minor nitpick, but this feels like another instance where Oda had more ideas for how to develop this whole thing of, what is it? The whole thing of Izo's staying back on Whitebeard's crew, even though he hates him and all that. It feels like he had more there, but he didn't get around to doing it. That does hurt this a little bit with this whole thing of like Izo now suddenly being okay with being on Whitebeard's ship, even though he hated him so much for what he did to Oden. But again, minor nitpick, doesn't really have too much bearing on this stuff. And you see Oden continuing to narrate, going, Roger said something to his oldest confidant, Raleigh, the man they called Dark King. And then he stepped off the ship. He had a whole bunch of medicine from the ship doctor Crocus. His disease was in its final stages. But this was a man's farewell. We were utterly stoic, not a tear was shed. For the crew of the King of the Pirates would never, ever cry. Honestly, after like the 10 millionth time of this gag of like, oh, men never cry, but they're getting super emotional, tears are streaming down their face, it gets a little bit old with Oda playing it up. But then you see the seas around Wano. It's like it's as brutal as ever. Piles of wrecked ships that tried and failed to get in. And you see as they're making their way through the currents of Wano, you see all these ships just shipwrecked on the pillars, jutting out in the sea. And Oden's like, if you steer into the wrong rapid currents, your ship will be smashed to pieces without getting any closer to Wano. Until this point, there was a purpose to this country being closed. But now we must open its ports before the day that Joy Boy appears. And Oden goes, it's not as though I'm dying, so of course... Oh, he's gonna get boiled and he's never gonna see them again. I'm getting way too much pleasure out of that. So he goes, of course, we parted with a smile. We all know that we'll meet again one day. No, you won't. Being an ass to Oden, but it's fun. You have Toki going, oh, Den, how I've missed you. And he's like, Toki, Momonosuke, Hiyori, I've missed you all too very, very much. And you see that Toki's wearing like this little cloak that's looking very, very patched up. The same with the kimono, it's looking all patched up. Same with the clothes that Momonosuke and Hiyori are wearing. He goes, look how big you are now, Momonosuke. And he goes, yes, father. And he's like, what's this? You've got proper manners too? And you have the scabbards in the background just going, welcome back, scoundrel. And he goes, and where are your proper manners? And they're like, oh, I didn't realize you were deserving of manners. And you see citizens of Wano going, Lord, or not of Wano, of Kuri going, Lord Oden, welcome back, Lord Oden. Lord Oden, we're so happy for you, Otoki. And Oden's just confused by this reaction as he goes, I seem to be popular? Thought they'd be angrier. Kinemon goes, you should be grateful to your wife, Lady Toki. And Kanjuro's like, yes, she is a woman of great character. Once her sickness passed, she went into town and helped the people with their work. She never put on airs for being the wife of a daimyo. She worked and sweat with everyone else and told exciting tales of your adventures. Lady Toki and the children are now tremendously beloved figures in Kuri. Because of all the great things they've said about you, the number of people who disparage your willful ways has dwindled down to nothing. And Oden's like, you did that for me? Thank you. And Toki's like, it's okay because we love you so much, Oden, right? And Raizo in the background just crying, going, oh, I'm so jealous. I wish I had game. And you have Oden going, Kiku, I want to talk to you about Izo. And Kiku goes, oh, I already heard from Dog and Cat. All that matters is that he's well. And he's like, I see. He's like, what about Denjiro and Ashura? I didn't see them a year ago either. And Cat Viper goes, Ashura's leading the Yakuza and bandits in Kuri to make sure they don't go wild. Denjiro's been wandering all over Wano, borrowing and paying back money. And Oden's like, holding back brigands, borrowing money? These are not the signs of a healthy country. And so they go, yes, there's another reason that everyone is delighted about your return. I will tell the story in order. After you left the country, we did our best to manage Kuri in the absence of his daimyo with the assistance of the populace. And Oden's like, so, my father really was in poor health then. I regret that I was unable to be present at his deathbed. And Kinemon goes, the real problem is the Shogun's successor. To our chagrin, your father, Shogun Sukiyaki, recommended none other than Orochi to... And you have Oden continuing the narration from there as he goes, the more I heard, the more confused I was. Orochi was like a brother to me now? All I did was lend him money out of consideration to Yasu. And you see Orochi in the flashback having come crying to Oden saying, please lend me money. And he goes, and he never once returned a single coin of it. On top of that, Orochi was the descendant of the Kurozumi clan that caused that terrible incident in the past. And now I find the Kurozumi Orochi is occupying the post of Shogun as my proxy? And he goes, as I'm sure you're aware, and then Kinemon continues, as I'm sure you saw on the way here, there are now a number of weapons factories in each region, full of supervisors who manage the labor therein. By the Shogun's own edict, the men have been put to work at the factories on wages too cheap to live on. Oden's like, how can this be? Why is everyone simply obeying a sniveler like Orochi? And Raizo goes, the problem is Orochi has the support of a pirate by the name of Kaido. And he is as strong as a monster. Orochi's taken advantage of that to do whatever he wants. Like, that's right. And if we were to fight back against Orochi... And Toki goes out, stop, Kinemon, don't tell him anything. Okay, so that's the scene I want to talk about, but I'll get to it after I finish recovering the rest of this. Oden's like, no, speak, man, what is it? And they go, Raizo, take Lord Momonosuke and Lady Hiyori out of the room. And he's like, right away. And they go, about half a year ago, at a weapons factory, there was a man who refused to work, and he and his family were executed. That was the last straw. We had enough of Orochi's barbarity. In our anger, we took up swords and marched to the flower capital to put a stop to Orochi, but, and Kiku goes, in the meantime, Kaido's followers snuck into Kuri behind us. They infiltrated the castle and threatened the life of your future heir to the Kozuki clan, Lord Momonosuke. And they all just bow their heads in shame as they go, ultimately, the enemies were driven back by Kawamatsu and Dogstorm, who had been standing guard at the castle. But it was none other than Lady Toki who gave up her body to block the enemy's arrows when they struck first. And Kinemon's like, I'm so sorry. It was because of our rash actions that Lady Toki suffered a terrible wound to her leg. We exposed your family to mortal danger. I'm so ashamed I have no excuse. And Oden's like, show me, Toki. And she's like, it's fine, Oden. The wound is already healed. He's like, they shot an arrow through you? And you see the little scar mark where the arrow was shot at her. As he hugs her and goes, you protected our son. You did so well. How it must have hurt. And Toki's like, stop, Oden. If you get angry over something trivial like this, the enemy will only... And he goes, trivial? Toki, you haven't heard the stories about my past. I see now how Orochi does things. Stay here and protect my family, men. Protect Kuri. So he grabs his sword and leaps out the castle. And he goes, I don't know all the ins and outs of the story. I just know this. A fool has taken control of Wano. And as he rushes out of the castle, they're all trying to say, stop, Lord Oden! And he goes, a weak, cowardly fool using the strength of a fearsome pirate and taking advantage of this closed nation where no one can interfere to turn our land into a hellscape. And you see Kaido's cronies going, Kozuki Oden is on his way to the flower capital. Report to Lord Orochi. And you have the citizens going, you mean Lord Oden is back? The legitimate heir? Will he be the new shogun now? And you see, Aie! And you see just you see a trail of destruction as Oden's just beating up everyone on his way into the shogun's castle. And they go, Shogun Orochi, come in! And you see Orochi surrounded by his the geishas, eating his extravagant feast, looking almost like we know him in the current time with his little crown on his head. And they go, huh? The Kozuki Oden has entered the castle. The soldiers are wiped out. Flee, my lord. And Orochi's freaking out, going, wait! Oden, think carefully. Kaido's not going to like it if you attack me. Think about what will happen to this country. And Oden just rushes in with the sword drawn and goes, only after I've cut you in two. And Orochi goes, oh no, I forgot. This guy's crazy. So, like I said, I don't really have a lot to say about the Roger stuff and everything else before this. So I kind of really want to focus on Oden, Toki, and I'll touch on the comments about the other stuff I made a little bit later on. But I want to focus specifically on Oden and some of the narrative aspects of this chapter that really bugged me. And this was something that's been touched on in Twitter in the last couple of days, where there's a subsection of fans, myself included, who are arguing about how Oden is written and framed in the narrative. And there's other fans that are arguing, that the criticisms are kind of unwarranted. So I kind of wanted to put out there what exactly the criticisms of Oden were, what people are really complaining about. And that time, I think I've kind of already touched on this a little bit in previous videos. But the problem with Oden, and this is kind of like something that's prevalent throughout the series, is a lot of people have this idea of, Oden is a flawed character. And this kind of ties back into, with his introduction, where we've seen that he kind of defies the traditional kind of rituals and attitudes and cultural things inherent in Wano. And, how a lot of people don't dislike him because he really is kind of like a black sheep or a rebel, where he doesn't conform to the customs or how people expect someone of his station to behave. And Oden kind of just goes around and flaunts this with his, devil may care kind of free attitude of, I don't care, I'll do whatever I want. And a lot of debate has been kind of been spilling out of that regarding, the way Oda's kind of structured his introductory flashback, where he's like, oh, ever since he was born, Oden was going to the gambling houses and visiting brothels, and he's been kidnapping women and all that. And like one of the things one of my friends, Kendra, a sniper of my heart on Twitter, touched on was how much the idea of treating women like props with Oden's flashback, where he's like, oh, he stole the women from all their husbands and created his own little personal harem. How that was being framed in the story as not, hey, this guy's going around kidnapping women, for whatever reason, but more like, oh, hey, either look at this badass, this bad boy, who all these women love because he's so unconventional, and charming and all this and likable and all that crap. And then you have the whole contrast of, people kind of digging into the potential subtext around that and saying, hey, yeah, Oden might be doing, something problematic, but, Oda's kind of dropping hints that there's more to it than what meets the eye, and the whole idea of the women aren't being held there against their will and they're free to leave at any time, etc., etc. And this tied into a comment and critique I made of this flashback overall, where Oda's trying to, with this chapter, Oda's trying to kind of put forth this idea that, hey, Oden might have been, a rabble rouser, blah, 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 whatever, but he was always doing what he thought was best, what he thought was right. Even if that meant, abandoning his country to go travel out to sea and to go on adventures and come back, whatever. And he's always doing, the best things, even if the citizens of Wano don't perceive it that way. And the problem is that isn't really a flaw in how it's presented. Because I think people are kind of construing the idea of, Oden being misunderstood with Oden as a flawed character, and kind of conflating those two into being like, oh, because he's misunderstood, he's flawed. And really, so far, all the flashback has really done is kind of downplay all of that and be like, hey, yeah, all of his selfishness and everything, the stuff that would make him a flawed character aren't really flaws, because these characters are here to excuse it and say, well, there's a reason for all these attitudes. Even if it seems this way at first, it's not really a bad thing. That's kind of what bugs me about this, because Oda seems to kind of want to make us fill in the blanks for him, where it's like, all right, Oden left Wano for some reason. Oda's hinting that, the reason he did it was he wants to find the answers for something, and that something was related to why the borders of Wano were closed in the first place. And, and Oden's going to be the one to reopen them again. And somehow the implication that, Oden always knew that there was something off about the country, he always knew that there was something more to it, blah, blah, blah. But Oda he doesn't even really hint at it, and yet fans are reading into all the subtext and kind of putting it out there and saying, yes, this is what Oda wants us to think. But Oda's not really laying any of the groundwork for it. So it's kind of frustrating when you have moments like this, where you're supposed to have the emotional attachment to, Oden coming back and finding out, all the shit that's been going down with Orochi, and finding out the country's now in shambles after everything he's done. It clashes with what we initially knew of him, where it's like, all right, Oden did not want to be a leader at any point during his life. This is kind of a role that people are trying to force on him, because, they're like, oh, he's powerful, he's charismatic, he's likable, blah, blah, blah. Which is a whole nother topic regarding, what really qualifies someone to be a competent or a good leader. which is something I eventually want to touch on. But then to have this idea, of that, like, Oden being this person that really didn't care, didn't really. No, let me take a step back because I was kind of going off track for a moment. Because I think I mentioned my criticism before I kind of digressed. One of the criticisms I had in my previous video was Oda really didn't do enough to kind of show that there was a bond between Oden and the citizens of Wano and kind of the country as a whole, where we're really given a reason to think that yes, this man really does care about his country, even if his actions are misunderstood within the context of that. And so, that's why when we have scenes like this where, Oden runs off to do whatever, and he comes back, and then Oda just kind of wipes it away with, well, Toki just told everyone Oden's really great, and everyone just bought into it because reasons or because they like Toki. It really all falls flat narratively. And again, like this is my problem with like the whole flaws things, like all the flaws of Oden, his selfishness, his desire not to be taken as a leader, the fact they didn't care about being misunderstood. It's all reframed as that being like, yes, he might be like that, but he's inherently a good person, so you can't really hold it against him for doing these things. And that leads into kind of my second criticism here so far of this part, last half of this chapter, which is Toki has really been treated as a prop in this entire flashback, because we have Oda's built up this mystery around her by being like, oh, she's from the Void Century, she's from Wano at some point, she has time traveling powers, and she's come back to Wano looking for something. And that's been all kind of shunted off to the side. And as you can try to justify that any way you like, but saying that, oh, Oda's obviously going to build up to something, we don't have the full story yet, it's just got to be something to Toki having been born 800 years ago. And that's all fine and true and fair, but that doesn't mean that Toki could not be her own character with her own agency. And that means just because we haven't explored these ideas that Oda may or may not have, means that she must be relegated to a prop. Because literally within like few pages of meeting her, Oden saves her from bandits, which is apparently enough to make her fall head over heels in love with him instantly. And then the rest of the flashback, she spends, making babies for Oden, taking care of said babies while he goes around gallivanting with the Roger Pirates, going on adventures, having fun at the time of his life, doing whatever. And Toki's kind of just there as a prop to, support him, as moral encouragement, take care of the children, and add to all those things. And then we come to the point later on, where again, fans were rightly critiquing the fact that Oden was making a very selfish decision to abandon this country, no matter what justifiable reasons he may have had to, decide that he needed to go out to sea to find something, whatever. And then you have Toki as a character, trying to justify his actions and really trying to excuse it by having her go, oh, Oden, if you don't leave right now, if you try to come back to Wano, I'm going to divorce you, make you so mad because blah, blah, blah. And a lot of fans are trying to defend that by being like, hey, well, Toki told Oden this, so it's obviously okay. But you don't seem to realize that, as a fictional character, Oda is entirely in control of Toki's actions, thoughts, feelings, whatever. And so, of course, he's going to have her play the role of someone that's going to say, hey, yeah, you're going to have to go do this thing that you want to do, or else I'm going to be super mad at you. And again, doing so in that scenario reframes it not as Oden, being selfish and flawed and doing something in that vein. It's framed more as, Oden really wanted to stay back at Wano, he really wanted to find out what was going on because he sensed something wrong with his country. But, Toki told him not to do it and he had to respect her wishes. it's just really, it's just a tired trope of having the women be like, oh, we'll give narrative justification for the men to be these selfish dicks and do whatever they want, and frame that as them being, reluctant heroes or whatever. And that again ties back into my problem with this, where you see Oden coming back after years away, after everything he's done. And again, we have Oda saying, yes, well, Toki reframed the conversation around Oden to be like, he actually is a super nice good guy at heart. You're all just misunderstanding him. Oden's the greatest. And again, like, I fail to see how that makes him a flawed person, where any action that would, any action that would result in some kind of consequence for him is reframed or rejustified by other characters to make him out in a better light. And then this leads to my absolute biggest problem with this chapter, and with my whole criticism of how Toki's being treated as a prop, which ties into what I thought was a relatively innocuous comment I made on Twitter, where I pointed out that in this series, the way that scars on men versus women are treated and framed are narratively different. To have men, have the scars on men kind of be a show, like a mark of experience. Yeah, basically like a mark of experience or pride or whatever. And with women, it's usually typically the opposite, where, a scar is either justification for a man to be righteously angry, or the scar is, something that mars a woman's beauty, or her delicate sensibilities or whatever. And a lot of people are kind of quick to leap on me to say, hey, Oden's telling us right there, or Oda's telling us right there through Oden, that Toki was so brave, she protected her children from that hail of arrows, even though she's not a fighter, etc., etc. So how can you say, it's like this and all that? So let's kind of talk about that kind of narrative choice. But before we get into that, I'll add, as a narrative choice, if Oda had gone the opposite way and said, Toki was actually rudely cowardly and didn't protect her children, that'd be vastly more interesting than leaning into the trope of, a mother figure will leap in front of whatever danger to protect her children. Because that's not really something that's narratively a bold choice for an author to include. But, going back to my point about the scars, I spent this last week, like leading up to this, trying to think of any prominent female characters in the series that have, any kind of notable scars, and how the story was framed around those. And the only two that could come to mind, I'm not including any of the zombies from Thriller Bark, because those were more surgical stitches, not really scars, not counting any of those. But the only two that came to mind were Nami and Brule. If anyone knows of any other examples, I'd be more than happy to hear them. You can either leave it in the comments below or hit me up on Twitter at King Cocoa Butter and let me know. But even in the case of Nami's scar, which she got for, after she stabbed herself in the shoulder to remove Arlong's tattoo, Nami's scar is nowhere to be seen on any of the current designs, because Oda apparently at some point kind of just forgot she had a scar and just completely wiped it off her. And the only other character, which was Brule, has a scar on her face. And again, that is narratively tied to, a man's story where she got the scar because people were mad at Katakuri, so they put a scar on Brule to get back at him. And you have, again, another narrative arc of a man being justified in his anger to go after these men who scarred his sister, and that kind of leads into the narrative for his whole story. And yes, you can argue that it makes perfect sense with Toki, blah, 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 because she's not a fighter, she wouldn't have had any way to defend against the people that came to get her, so it makes perfect sense, etc., etc. Except no one seems to acknowledge that, again, that is a narrative choice that Oda made. And if we'd taken this story and let's say we redid this narrative as, you know, everything plays out exactly the same, except instead of the scabbards being, you know, completely like, oh, how could we let poor Lady Toki have been defenseless like this? You could have had it framed as, you know, yes, the scabbards weren't there, but Toki managed to take down everyone that came after her, you know, even though she was scarred. And the scabbards could have been, you added that part of the reason they're so proud of Toki, apart from, you know, she was a normal person that didn't put on airs of being royalty. They could have been like, well, you know, your wife was really strong. She did protect the family while we were away, and we're so proud of her, you know, having the strength to have cut down everyone, even though we weren't there to assist her. And with that same narrative, you could have also still had Oden be justified in his anger, where he's like, yes, you know, Toki, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of the fact you managed to fight back against the invaders. You know, I'm glad you managed to cut them down, but I'm still going to go get Orochi for having to do something so underhanded. You could have both of those narratives fit together perfectly in a scenario like this, but Oda chose to have it be framed as, you know, oh, look at Toki, she's defenseless and this and that. She's not a fighter, because it makes Oden look better. And it's always been kind of a narrative, an easy narrative choice for male authors to have women be abused or hurt or some attacked, because it makes it easier for them to kind of be like, you know, it's a quick shorthand to say, hey, this guy's an asshole because he, you know, he goes and attacks women who, along with children and everything else, you know, are the ones that are weak and defenseless and can't handle themselves. And, you know, and that way the man has a justified reaction to go mete out violence and justice, you know, and the claims of protecting his family. So, like, if this weren't such a prominent, pervasive trend in One Piece as a whole, yeah, it'd be easy to kind of overlook and dismiss it as not being serious. But when it's something we see repeatedly happen over and over and over again, I think it is justified for fans to call it out and say, hey, Oda can and should be doing better, you know, with this series. That said, that's really only the thoughts I've got about that. If anyone feels differently, if they feel like, you know, there's some point I wasn't addressing, or there's something I was simplifying, whatever, please feel free to put your own counter arguments in the comments below, or again, hit me up at Twitter at King Cocoa Butter, and I'd be more than happy to kind of have a discussion about this if there's something you feel like I have missed. But yeah, apart from that, those were all my thoughts regarding that. So I hope that clarified some things. So with that said, let us dive into the most recent chapter, One Piece chapter 969, Fool of a Lord. And we have Gang Bege's Oh My Family, Volume 18, Gaudi versus the Navy. And you see that the Navy, the two new naval recruits that they have, are just putting the stomp on Gaudi as they completely smash him to the ground bloodied. And we have translation, Stephen Paul, lettering, Vanessa Satone. And so we pick up where we left off the last chapter with Oden rushing in with both the swords drawn, about to slash at Orochi. And he's screaming out with an ah! And he's like, wait, no, Oden, don't do it! And he's Oden thinking back to Toki saying, if you get angry over something trivial like this, the enemy will strike back again. And he goes, Orochi! He's like, ah! He's like, yeah! As he slashes downwards through Orochi's midsection. Oden's like, huh? Come on. Okay, alright. Boy. Alright. So you see the old shamisen player that was accompanying the old witch when she first came to Orochi and gave him the whole shebang about the Kurozumi's history, and was telling him about his past and everything. You see that shamisen player is doing Bartolomeo's signature barrier movement as he stopped playing, and you see a little dome protecting Orochi as you see as you see Oden slashes just getting deflected off to the side. And Orochi's like, ha, ha. And then Oden's like, what was that? He's like, what is this? And he's just slashing away again to get the barrier as Orochi's recoiling with it. Aye! And he can't make his way through to him. And Oden's like, is it glass? Doesn't seem to be. Get out of there, Orochi. And Orochi's like, eek! And you have, oh my god, the Biwa playing priest is Kurozumi Semimaru. And he goes, there's nothing to worry about, Master Orochi. We have faith in the barrier arts. This barrier will resist any attempt to breach it. Your strength means nothing here, Oden. And you have the old hag off to the side, and her name is Higurumi, or Kurozumi Higurashi. And she goes, Kyo, 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 that's right. If you were a pirate, you should be quite aware of the supernatural powers conferred by a devil fruit. And Oden's like, you have powers then? And she's like, that's right. As they say here, we are sorcery users. It's a very interesting phrasing of words. And Orochi's kind of getting his confidence back as he's seeing that Oden has no way to reach him. He goes, mwah, mwah, ha, ha, ha. If this was a problem anger and violence could solve, Oden, that all of the daimyos of Wano would have done it already. But nobody can kill me. And then you see the citizens outside going, did you see that? Lord Oden rushed the castle. The rightful heir of the Kozuki clan has returned. Yippee, we'll have a new shogun at last. I'm sure he'll drive out Kaido too. He'll kick out Orochi. And you see them chanting, Lord Oden, Lord Oden. And Orochi goes, I don't know why. Oh no, it's Oden going, I don't know why it happened, but I hear that my father pushed for you to be the shogun's proxy, but only until I came back. So give up the shogun's seat to me right now. I had no intention of being the man in charge, but I know that I can do better for this country than you. Oh boy. Alright, I'll touch on that once we get to the end of this chapter. Orochi's like, mwah! But there's a twist. There's always another twist. And he goes, that statement did not actually contain the shogun's authority. The old lady's like, kyo, kyo. As she transforms into Sukiyaki, who goes, ah, it is good to see you back again, Oden. And he's like, what, father? How are you alive? And the old lady transforms back with a kyo, 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 kyo. And he's like, what? The daimyo? Oh, and Orochi goes, what the daimyo and all those fools believed in was a person in disguise with the power of the clone fruit. And she's like, me! He's like, yes, this hag. Yes, it was all lies. Mwah, ha, ha, ha. The entire country believed it, and they all arranged for me to take the shogun's throne. In other words, I am under no obligation to cede control to you. At this point, nobody can possibly know what the real Sukiyaki was thinking. And you have Oden going, what did you do to my father? Did he actually die of illness? And Orochi just puts on his evil scheming face. And you see on the outside as people are still cheering Lord Oden. As the crowds looked up at the castle, cheering the return of the Kozuki clan, poisoned arrows struck here and there as though from nowhere. Two people collapsed, spitting up blood. They both fell blind. And they go, ah, eek! So, doctor, doctor! You go, as the people townspeople fled indoors in a state of panic, they witnessed amid the clouds rolling in the sight of an enormous dragon floating over the capital. He grew from wild child to daimyo of Kuri. They went to sea and traveled among the world's greatest pirates, returning many times stronger than when he'd left. Kozuki Oden returned invincible and triumphant. In him, the people saw a savior who would rescue them from a cruel tyrant. And you see up in the rafters above, in a nod back to the wanted poster, you see Shinobu spying on the conversation between Oden and Orochi. What the hell, man? And you see in the next page, Oden dancing in the street in his loincloth with the sign of chicken wing stick on it. And the narrator continues, but within just a few hours, Kozuki Oden was seen, stripped to his loincloth outside of Shogun Orochi's palace, and dancing like a fool. You see, Orochi and Kaido's underlings laughed and laughed. Excuse me, he danced and begged for spare change, and finally walked away. The return of Kozuki Oden, the rightful heir of Wano, had been the country's final hope in a manner of speaking, but the people's hopes were betrayed, and their great disappointment eventually turned to anger. And you see them just clenching their fists like, what's wrong with him? It is the foolish lord of Kuri, that's Kozuki Oden. His fear of snakes gives him the blues, and if you laugh, you lose. Hoo hoo. And you have it going. Oden appeared in the capital once a week, and he goes around dancing. And each time he's got a loincloth with a different food on it, with konbu and konnyaku, and so on. And they have people going, here he is again. And they go to caper about in the front of the capital, in front of the castle for scraps, whether rainy or windy or snowy. And you see the vassals going, please, Lord Oden. And he goes, I dance in the buff every week and receive money. That's my job. And they're like, please, tell us the truth. What did you speak about with Orochi? Why would you do this? Even the people of Kuri who believed in you the longest have grown sick of this. And you see tales of his antics in the capital reached Kuri too. And you see as he's walking through the Kuri, just waving at everyone, children are throwing rocks at him. They go, it's the fool of a lord. Whatever you do, don't turn out like him. He's pathetic. They go, a real samurai would rather commit seppuku than be Orochi's lapdog. After a year of this, which was 24 years before today, Oden received a newspaper from abroad courtesy of Shogun Orochi. He ran up and down the beach, wailing, then laughing, then wailing again. And you see him running with the wah as he's just rolling onto the sand. And he goes, wah, ha, 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 ha. The world was buzzing over the public execution of the king of the pirates, Gold Roger. And the allure of the vast fortune he'd left behind, the One Piece, sent all kinds of people out to sea on a treasure hunt. It was the start of the great age of piracy. And you have Oden, tears streaming down his face, going, Roger, you wonderful man, what a life. You have in the second year since Oden's return, a battle broke out in Ringo. The Gecko Pirates versus the Animal Kingdom Pirates. The grave of Ryuma, god of the blade, was ransacked this time. Again, I'll touch on that at the end once we get through this chapter. We have all throughout Oden danced, and all who associated with Kuri's foolish lord were painted with the same brush. There was the family of the laughing stock. You have Oden, playing with Hiyori and baby Momonosuke. And he looks at Toki going, do you want a divorce? And she goes, is that a joke, or are you trying to make me mad? You have the vassals who are going, well, we've been familiar with your naked dancing for years and years, Lord Oden. Ka pa 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 pa. And like, it's nothing new to us. And to those few to whom he getting tongue-tied. And those few to whom he owed a personal debt. You have Yasue going, he might be a fool, but calling him a lord is more than he deserves. And you see him making his way over to Hyogoro's estate as one of his henchmen is standing outside blocking the way, going, hey, you better stay away from Boss Hyogoro, fool of a lord. And a woman comes up from behind him and whacks him on the head, goes, stop that! Please, stop in and have some tea. Oh, Oden is here. And you see Oden taking tea with old Boss Hyogoro and his wife. As Hyogoro goes, that damned Orochi just won't give up. I'd never work for a man like him. And Oden's like, well, don't put yourself in danger, Hyo. And his wife goes, I was just telling him that your dancing's gotten so much better, Oden. He said, please, ma'am, spare me. And you have 3 years passed, and we see the fool of a lord is back again. And you see him dancing in the street in the snow with the loincloth saying daikon radish on it. As he goes, Wachu! Snow's a bit nippy. And you have 4 years passed, and nothing in Wano changed. And you see the citizens going, that Oden's so obnoxious. And you have, in the 5th year, the Shogun has come to Kuri, the Shogun Orochi. It's like Orochi made his move on Kuri. And you see him just riding in a palanquin with the horses and the ninja next to him. And he goes up to Oden, who bows to him, and he goes, I would like to build a number of new weapons factories here. And I want your help, Oden. And he goes, but Shogun, what of the ships? With Kaido? And Orochi's just like, what do you mean? Wano will be a weapons producer. And as for Hyogoro, he's beyond my means to control. So I gave him to Kaido. He'll probably be dead before long. All the citizens are like wondering, what? Of course. There you go. His old woman clung to him and wouldn't let go, so they shot her dead. You'd figure a mobster's wife would have had more self-control. Mwahaha. He thinks back to how Oden thinks back to how nice Hyogoro's wife was to him. And he goes, the man who controlled the underworld from the flower capital, Hyogoro the Flower, was taken prisoner. When his followers fought back, a total of 16 died, plus Hyogoro's wife. You see them go, give our boss back! As his family and vassals had largely assumed, the great samurai had been shouldering some terrible burden all alone for 5 long years. And this was the last straw of his perseverance. Great big tears spilled from his eyes as the emotions he'd held back came flooding out all at once. And he goes, as he lifts his face, tears streaming down, anger. And he's getting super angry. See the veins popping out. He goes, the time has come to strike down Kaido. And his vassals like, that's what we've been waiting to hear you say for all these years. We have now gather around, and you shall bear witness to the once-in-a-lifetime uproar caused. You see the citizens of Korea going, huh? What's this? By Kozuki Oden, the man for whom all of Wano wept. With him stood 9 men, made samurai through his patronage. The hour was sunset, the sun crimson red. It shone like flames upon these men heading into battle, and the katanas they wore at their waists burned just as brightly with life. Afterwards, in reference to these red scabbards and in honor of their strength and loyalty, people called them the Akazaya 9. Their foe was Kaido. They paid heed to no other. The story of their march is a thing of the past, sadly, and it ends in the public execution of Kozuki Oden. And now, dear audience, let not your eyelids blink lest you miss a single moment of what shall be known as the Hour of Legends. Alright, so despite my misgivings with kind of everything else in this chapter, I do really love this spread and kind of the whole poetic kind of kabuki play way it's kind of structured out with the narrative and everything else. This part, I really do love that aspect of it. So let's kind of talk about the other problems I have with it. So the way that Kurozumi Samamaru and Higurashi are speaking, it seems like, because I'm wondering where Oda's going with that, because the way the narrative is being laid out, it makes me think that they've left Wano at some point, or exiled, whatever. They went out into the world, learned about what devil fruits were and everything else like that, and then came back once they got these powers to kind of reinstate whoever their descendant was. But that makes me wonder, why Orochi's never knew he had ancestors like this or relatives like this. I'm still somewhat of the mind that this is a CP0 plot that kind of got derailed by the arrival of Kaido to Wano. But that's something we'll have to see get addressed later on. The only other thing I'm curious about is what happened to these two and how their powers went to Bartolomeo and Bon Clay. Because I'd kind of suspect if they died on Wano, the fruits would have just respawned somewhere in the vicinity of Wano. So I wonder if something else happened, if they either got potentially maybe killed during the raid the Scabbards are leading, or if they died from old age or whatever. That's something I'm kind of curious to see played out later. And then eventually I want to kind of talk about this idea that Oda keeps kind of repeatedly going back to, with that, having a strong moral compass, being super powerful and charismatic somehow qualifies you to be a good leader. I kind of want to touch on that later, but that's a bigger topic to kind of cover. And again, like Oden suddenly being like, oh, stuff's coming back to finally bite me in the ass after, I went and ran around the world and decided not to be a leader. I wish it had a lot more emotional impact than it does. But like I commented, a lot of it is undercut by the fact Oda did not do enough to really explore that connection, and just kind of vaguely throwing hints out there really isn't enough to build up the emotional connection that deserves or will elicit more of a response to this. So while I'm kind of sitting here reading this thinking, yeah, that's kind of tragic and sad, if Oda had actually taken the time to kind of, explore the social issues in Wano via Oden, there would have been a lot more impact to this moment specifically. But again, slight digression. So a couple of other things to note is I'm more convinced now that also that Momonosuke's devil fruit was created after Vegapunk experimented on Kaido. Because there's the whole line, as the clouds boiled into the capital, that's where the dragon appeared. And the fact that Momonosuke is able to use the clouds to, fly and get himself out of the pit in Punk Hazard makes me even more certain that Kaido's doing the same, where he's creating the clouds around him as he's flying, and that's why they're showing up the same time as the dragon does. And the other curious thing I'm kind of want to see explored is, I don't know if Oda's insinuating with this chapter that Shinobu is the actual traitor, because I don't, unless he's going to reveal that, she somehow was too far away or something, or couldn't lip read, and so she couldn't see what Oden and Orochi were talking about. The fact that she witnessed everything that went down in that room, but didn't tell the other scabbards about it because they very clearly did not know what happened. They're trying to find out. So I wonder if it's either if he's going to go that route of having her to be the traitor and just a really good actress, or if it's going to be another Zoro on Thriller Bark kind of moment where it's like, where Shinobu didn't want to kind of embarrass Oden or go against his wishes because of what he was doing, so she kind of held the secret in between herself and didn't tell any of the scabbards. But again, I guess that's something we'll see once this flashback finally kind of gets over. And again, I'm not sure if Oda had to come up with his excuse of Oden just sat by idly for 5 years. It feels almost like he might have done that because he didn't plot out the timelines that well. By the time he realized it, it was too late to correct. And so it's like, I need to come up with a reason why he'd sit idle for 5 years. But guess we'll see about that. Another quick comment for Moria. Seeing him in this flashback makes me even more certain of my idea that Kaido tortured Moria's crew in front of him and killed them, and then tortured Moria himself before Moria was able to escape from Wano and leave with his broken spirit. Because in both this chapter and in the Chapter 0 flashback, when we see Moria, he doesn't have those little crisscross kind of scars or whatever, like the surgical scar things on his neck and his chest. And the fact that the costume he's wearing now, like the aristocratic costume's kind of covering up his chest, makes me wonder if it covers up the scars going all the way down because Kaido bisected him in the torture. But this flashback's making me even more certain that's what happened. And then we get to the last little point I have about this, which is, again, we have another woman being used as a prop for a man's justified anger. As a double whammy because Oda's done it twice now for Oden, where it turns out, the thing that finally made him snap, finally made him, decide I'm going to have to take down Orochi no matter what, is the reveal that Hyogoro's wife was tragically killed, during the uprising, and, how dare Orochi do something like that. That is it just annoys me to no end that it's a consistent narrative choice by Oda to do something shitty like that. It really ticks me off. And that also undercut a lot of the emotional tension I felt for, sympathizing with Oden's situation. because I'm tired of that narrative choice. It's just such a shitty one to see done. But I guess we've only got a couple of chapters left for this flashback now going forward, because it seems like we're in the end game climax now, where they're gonna go, or Kaido's castle. We'll see, Kaido and Oden clashing. We'll probably see whatever led to Dogs from a Cat Viper having their conflict, whatever. Because I'm guessing after this, apart from the scabbards that got sent into the future, we'll start to see what happened to the others when they left Wano. Because I know there's a theory floating around there that Denjiro could potentially be Zoro's old sensei of Koshiro, at least related to him. It'll be interesting to see if we get confirmation on that with the next couple of chapters. Well, Dogs from Cat Viper got away, Kawamatsu got imprisoned, Ashura stayed behind as well, and Denjiro is the only one unaccounted for. So I wonder we'll find out what happened to him. But yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of ending this flashback hopefully soon and seeing what direction Oda takes it from there. Overall, this was a semi-decent chapter. Like I said, there was some good emotional moments, but it was undercut by a lot of the poor narrative choices Oda's made at the beginning of this flashback. But not really much I can do about that now. But like I said, I also did really love the ending paneling and everything else that went on there. So with that, I will now wrap up this very long kind of reaction review and all that kind of good stuff. And like I mentioned at the beginning, I'll probably get back to doing weekly reaction reviews to One Piece going forward, just so I can kind of keep in the narrative loop and also keep the conversation, keep relevant with the conversation rather than kind of coming to it too late. But apart from that, if you like my videos, please do like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, because it really does mean a lot as a show of support, and it really does help me as well. And like I said, if you have any issues or problems or counter criticisms to anything I've talked about in this video, please feel free to leave me a comment below or hit me up on my Twitter at King Cocoa Butter, and I would be more than happy to kind of discuss it, explore different thoughts about anything I might have missed. And until next time, this is Ash. Talk to y'all later.